YouTube, this is HK58, and I'm going to talk to you about a few elf cards I'd love to see come into Modern. Some may be too powerful, but maybe not. And not just Modern, actually come through Standard. See what it would change when they have elf strategy, future elf strategies. So the first card I'm going to talk about is Shroud Sentinel. This one would be a great card to work with as a any of the Shroud names come back into future planes or new planes, old planes. But this one's basically a Squadron Hawk, where he enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 3 of these cards and put them into your hand. It'd be a crazy standard-styled Squadron Hawk, but as a non-flyer, and it costs 1 more. But still enough, so it can come into interesting strategies in the future. I'm not talking about now, but in the future. The next one, Shroud Elite, 1 mana, 1/1, but it gets +1/+2, as long as any opponent controls any non-basic lands. Outside of monocolor decks and budget decks, most every single, like 95% of the modern meta has non-basic lands. Even the monocolor decks have a non-basic land here and there, especially the devotional monocolor decks. So this would be really good as a 1 mana 2/3 half the time. So it'd be Elves Curdape in a way. Now, it'd be kind of nice if it was any basic, non-basic land any player controls. But outside of that, it's still not bad of a card. I'm not saying it'd be game-breaking. It'd be more of a budget-friendly type card. Especially there's so many other versions of this out there, and you rarely see them being used other than Curdape and Wild Nicodle. But see what's built around it. Edric's Spymaster of Trust. I don't know how well this would be played in Modern, since you have to be attacking your opponent to draw cards. That's the only way it's going to, give you card draw, but a blue-green deck with Edric would be kind of cool to see. So it's not, the greatest. It dies to bold. It dies to a bunch of kill spells. However, if there's some strategy where you could build around it, let's bring it out and see what happens. Especially since you're dealing combat damage and you're drawing cards. Elf decks are known to bash in. Color of the Claw. This one's definitely a modern, fun card to see. This would be a great card to see in most all modern elf decks. Color of the Claw. 3 mana for a 2/2 flash. Enters the battlefield. Put a 2/2 bear creature token into the battlefield for each non-token creature that died this turn. It's great after anything but Anger of the Gods board wipes. I will admit that. Other than Anger of God, we got so many different other board wiping cards to where this would just be very handy. You keep up 3 mana, they're going to board wipe, and you just trick them out of nowhere. Boom. You got some bears. You got 4 or 5 bears coming in, 3 to 5 bears plus this. So that when it's your turn, you can play it. And as well as it's a flash creature, if they even just bolted 1 and you just want to get the advantage on them, you can flash this in. There's so many strategies this would be great in. And I'm not just saying elf decks would love this, just creature decks in general. Any creature deck with green would love to pick this up. Just for those board wipes. The next card is Revolt, Emissary of Trust. Some people are going to be hating, saying there can be combos with this. This card is played in Legacy. However, I wouldn't mind seeing it tested in Modern to see how well it would do. Granted, there might be a certain artifact that would actually bust this card in a way. At worst case, you can get rid of that card. But any other strategies you guys can think of, you can throw them in the comments below of how crazy this card would be. But outside of that, if you made like I don't remember the enemy colored names, but the black, blue, green elf strategy or any sort of bug control decks would love this card. So it slows your opponent down from drawing extra cards, as well as you're going to make sure that any of your permanents are targeted, you get to draw a card. So you're going to replace it. Even if you play this as 3 mana, 3/3 creature, they waste a bolt. That's just basically you pay a bolt, you bolt to nothing, and I draw a card. And it's kind of a sense, even though I bolted the creature. But this is probably one of the most toughest elves on this list that, might be game breaking. However, that's why I want to see what tests can be done in a modern format, because it's slower than Legacy, but it's super faster than Standard. Wirewood Herald. When it dies, you get an elf. You tutor an elf, put it to your hand, but it has to die. Outside of any strategies, no one's going to want to block this. So you could trick in on this so you don't tutor, unless they decide to say, okay, you can have your elf. But other than that, it'll die many ways except Anger of Gods and Empath. So it may actually be handy, but there's still some better cards out there. This would be more of a budget elf-friendly deck card for an elf deck. So, Well-Wisher would be kind of cool to see. It may not actually work out as being any sort of elf deck because of how expensive it costs to how its power and toughness is and how late you have to get it out there just to start gaining that life. Other than that, it's kind of a cool little card to start going, oh, I gained 12 life. Oh, I gained 12 life. Then you get Wrathed, and then it's like, well, I'm ahead 24. Well, if you're in that type of strategy. But hey, who knows? It wouldn't work really well against Burn because all Burn has to do is devote one of their bolts to it, and you're not getting ahead. Other than it is slowing them down just a little bit. Elvish Vanguard's another little interesting elf. Whenever another elf comes into play, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this guy can get bigger. It can be the Tarmogoyf of elf decks, to where anytime you play an elf, it gets bigger. Is it that great? It's just one of those cards I will have to say can be tested. There's a lot of elf decks that play 2 to 3 elves in a game, and it comes into play and not be cast. So there's some Dwendlin's Elite, I think it is, where it comes and plays a 2/2, but then you get a 1/1 with it, as long as there's an elf in play. You have this on turn 2, then turn 3, you play that and another elf. This thing's getting +3/+3, so it's already a 4/4. So it can be very, very useful in an elf deck. It may make elf decks a little more stronger. May is the key word. Wirewood Hive Master. A non-token elf comes into play. Create an insect token. Another interesting old-style card. It'd be kind of fun to see be played for the new player. Let new players play it. I don't know how well this would go in an elf deck, but hey, it might actually be handy. It just doesn't create elf tokens, it creates insect tokens, which may change a little bit in some gameplay. But outside that, let's see what the players can play it with. Fierce Empath. Tutors a 6 mana costing creature. 3 mana, 1/1. It's just kind of like Treasure Mage, but for creatures. And it's a 1/1 instead of a 2/2. So this one would be kind of cool for some of those decks that want to find their Wormcoil Engine or anything like that. Especially, and I personally can say this could potentially be useful in a Tron deck, one of the traditional Tron decks where they want Eldrazi, sorry, not Eldrazi, Wormcoil Engine. They need that Wormcoil Engine. Here's your 5th Wormcoil. Especially since they're already having ways to cast green mana. So here's another green mana spell that can get you a Wormcoil. Ambush Commander, I just threw it on the list because it would be kind of cool to see if any interesting, crazy strategy be made. But to risk have a Wrath of God to be your land destruction as well, can be kind of costing. This one could be one of those ones that could make it into Standard, kind of like in the past where the Goblin Commander version of this actually made it into Standard. But obviously the Goblin one's better. This one can be a blowout if the person has the right card against you. Other than that, you're swinging in with a lot of permanents, on the other hand, as well as you're pumping by sacrificing an elf. And that is the last card. I know this wasn't the best of lists I did, but, I just want to get some elves out there to see, what people thought about what elves would be kind of cool to see in Modern, that's older played, or older style Legacy, that's not even ran in Legacy. or even not even in Pauper, but it'd be kind of cool to see them transition into a new format that's being created, but it hasn't been. It's been around a while, so you know, what are your opinions on Elves coming into Modern? Let me know. I'll talk to you all later.